Attention to detail in map design is something that I am a huge fan of. I believe the potential it shows in making a world feel more lived in, more experienced, and frankly more interesting is an invaluable part of not only storytelling, but game design as a whole. On that note, Psychonauts 2 is a gem of a game. It's an amazing story, creative world design, fun gameplay, and heavy attention to detail. So, it's hard for me not to love it, and it's hard for me to not want to make a video on it. So, I would like to spend today's video zooming in on one particular detail, obscured in the background of one particular mission, to showcase the extreme attention to detail that is located within this game, and how this attention to detail enriches the story being told throughout the mission and throughout the story as a whole. So, let's get right into this. So, this little detail occurs in the mission, Cassie's Collection, and since this mission occurs near the end of the game, this is your mandatory spoiler warning. If you haven't played through all of Psychonauts 2, or at least up to this mission, when you plan on playing through, and getting all the surprises of the plot yourself, I highly suggest you click off and do so now. And I do also highly suggest you do play this game, it is quite amazing. But if you're still here, then that means you're willing to be spoiled or have already gotten to that point in the story. So, for a quick review for our setting. Cassie is one of the original Psychonauts, who years ago, along with Agent Ford, fought and defeated Maligula, a extremely evil, powerful psychic. However, despite defeating Maligula, nobody who participated in the battle was able to walk away unscathed, with all of them having long-lasting mental trauma, which is what we explore throughout the story of the game. This devastated nature of all of the original Psychonauts' brain is interesting, but refocusing back on Cassie in particular, we find the mind that this level takes place in. Cassie, much like all of her fellow original Psychonauts, has still not fully recovered. When we meet her, we see she has isolated herself from society, living only with a huge swarm of bees. And it is our job to delve into her mind and try to set things right, as well as to possibly deal with the bee problem that is hounding the camp. And it is through the navigation of the inside of Cassie's mind that we learn more about her backstory, her upbringing, and the internal responses that she had to the various troubles life threw at her, while also showing us the vast damage that Maligula left on her. This is the core concept of this mission. So, to help us navigate this mind and try to fully get a grasp on understanding her, we use different books to jump through the different parts of her memory and her brain. These books on the surface are clearly a symbolism of Cassie's past history as an author. However, looking deeper, we see that the story doesn't end here. Obviously, we have the main focus of the stories all being about bees, the animals she surrounded herself with in her isolation, and it had been the main focus of her research. However, digging into the words written in the margins of these books that we explore through, and the words that make up the platforms we jump around, we begin to find a hidden story under the surface. These small parts of the hidden story, individually, are very hard to figure out, as they are isolated and fractured. They lack the context that makes figuring them out required. However, we get to see a look at what a completed story should look like. When we first open up a new book, we get a few frames where the completed version of the story, unfragmented, is shown to us. The other way one could solve this story would be by collecting all of the fragments and presenting them as a unified whole. Both results would get you the end result that I am going to be talking about now. So, the story, which was originally written in Latin, can be roughly translated to the following. The wasp once said, "Eat the beehive. 6 strong bees they begin to bombulate. The first bee told the story. It was bad. The second sang the peace song. He did not love him. The third was asking help from the ants, and they said, I don't want to. The fourth used the vines, but he broke loose. The fifth tried to freeze. The wasp did not see. The 6th bee finally got the better of them, but he lost his mind." The first bee is most disappointed. In many ways, she had failed at first. Build stronger self. She released her kindness on her desk. He left another beehive, but she is alone in the beehive. It frightens strangers, and he lives there to this day. There is a lot to unpack from this story and the symbolism behind it. Starting with the symbolism of the wasp, however, we know in nature that wasps often prey on bees and are far stronger and far more able than any bee. However, they're pretty similar animals. This is, once again, in parallel to the situation that we know of Maligula versus the 6 original Psychonauts, which means it's not too much of a jump in logic to assume that the wasp is representative of Maligula. And ignoring biology, I think you would also come to this conclusion, as it's clear with the 6 strong bees that began to bombulate that clearly represent the 6 founders of the Psychonauts, that this is detailing the battle that changed all of their psyches, a battle that went down in history. The word bombulate means a buzzing or droning sound, clearly a symbolic way to detail the pleas and cries that the team tried to do to get their friend back. But Lucy was gone, and Maligula was all that was left. They had to fight her. And as we continue into the story, we can see how each person attempted to fight back. Starting with the first bee, who clearly represents Cassie, as Cassie is a writer and attempted to write a story to stop Maligula in her tracks. It didn't work, with Cassie still clearly showing signs of regret over this, as her line that details her action is the only one to be followed by a description that is as negative as it was bad. She believes her story and her attempt were horrible, and she most likely harbors ill will towards the event and her participation and lack of success, still to this day. From here, we see her talk about each of the different plans of each different psychic. From Helmet to Zanato to Otto, each of them tried and failed to stop her using different means. This is the story that we learn throughout the progress of the game. It is ultimately the 6th and final bee, Ford, who is finally able to bring her down, to defeat Maligula. But this defeat cost him his mind, and is a massive plot point in the story if you've played through Psychonauts 2. It seems then that the story moves on from this massive event to cover her, or the first bee's journey, following the battle. She viewed herself as a failure, unable to do anything to stop Maligula, and as the story stated, build a stronger self, left her kindness on her desk. She tried to abandon her past and reforge herself in a way that was strong enough to make up for her past failures, thus resulting in the librarian figment that we see in the level. A strong, cold version of herself is able to process the failures that she went through, and hopefully never replicate them. The story is concluded with a lot of symbolism in order for her to detail her life at the moment. He left another beehive. Early on, we know that this line, beehive, is used to refer to something that the wasp wants to attack. Considering that Maligula attacked the old Psychonauts headquarters, most likely beehive stands for headquarters and the home where the battle took place. He left another beehive, symbolizing Ford and the Psychonauts' entirety moving out of this old headquarters to the mother lobe. If we accept this definition of beehive, then the next line, but she is alone in the beehive, is clearly a reference to how she's the last one still at the old headquarters, just with her and her bees. And finally, the line, it frightens strangers, and he lives there to this day. The it frightening strangers is clear, a reference to the Green Needle Witch that she utilizes as a personification of the terror of the forest to keep trespassers out. However, it is within that final line that I get a bit of confusion, and he lives there to this day. I could be making the wrong assumption, and I'm just going to assume my translator is incorrect, and that it means she, as this would make sense seeing as Cassie is still in the old headquarters all the way up till we meet her in the level. There's one last thing I would like to state about this story: the nature in which we get revealed the story. If you don't go the cheap way of utilizing the double pages that are clearly easy to see in between opening a book, and instead utilized each individual page puzzle, we get told the story in a somewhat different way. While we'll still get the same end result as the double pages, the emphasis put on certain parts and the symbolisms there is greatly increased. For example, on the pages talking about Helmut Fullbarrel's adventures, we see notes, musical notes, as if it's a song, clear sign to his song that he tried to sing. On the pages about her and her personal failures, we see dark ink and sporadic writing, a clear sign of the regret leaking into it. And on pages that simply tell clear events that have no clear bias, we see it written cleanly, plainly, written as if it's just another page in the story. But that's it for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I had a lot of fun being able to cover this. Being able to cover cool little secrets hidden in this extra detail and showing just how cool this type of stuff is to me is some of my favorite stuff to do. So I'll probably be making more videos like this in the future. But until then, this has been Christopher Beast, and I hope to see you all next time.